Good afternoon. The May 19th edition of the Oklahoma City Water Utilities Trust is in session. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the May 5th meeting.
I move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the May 5th minutes. Are there comments, questions? Hearing none, voting please. Minutes are approved. Next item is a consent docket.
Move the consent docket subject to individual consideration.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the consent docket. Are there matters to be considered individually? Hearing none, voting please. Consent docket's approved. Next item. Emergency resolutions, item 4. The first one is a resolution declaring an emergency concerning Project XXX and Northeast 178th to 192nd.
Mr. Chairman, I thought I'd provide you a little bit of background information. We supply treated wastewater to what we call the Redbud Power Plant. It's an OG&E facility in the northeast, distant from the city, northeast of our largest wastewater treatment plant, the North Canadian plant. That pipe had a break on it that line maintenance could not repair. It was down toward the river and too deep and too long a reach for our existing equipment to make the repair. Time was of the essence because the power plant was down for winter servicing but coming back online in the next week. So that's why I declared an emergency. It's critical to be able to generate the power, to have the pipe in service.
I'd move the item.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve item 4A. Voting please. It's approved.
Mr. Chairman, I'd point out that Mr. Graves' timing was impeccable to get here because we need the fourth vote for the emergency, and
I understand. You moved the emergency?
we don't need to move
Do you
the
have a second?
We don't need.
Motion and a second for the emergency. It's approved. Next item, item 4B, is a resolution ratifying the general manager's actions in declaring an emergency to allow water to be diverted into Lake Hefner during the severe storm.
Move approval. Second.
Motion and a second to approve item 4B. Voting, please. That's approved. It also needs an emergency.
Actually, Councilman, this is just a resolution of emergency. This resolution declares the emergency, so we don't need, this isn't like an ordinance. We don't need to do a separate vote because I know you're opposed to this.
Okay. You know how much I love voting for emergencies. The next item, item 5, items for individual consideration. The first thing is a presentation of the 2016 trust budget.
Trustees, I'm very pleased to get to visit with you today about the sources and uses of funds, how that ties into the city manager's recommended budget for operations, and to describe for you some of the capital improvements we're going to be doing this year. So I'll talk a little bit about our service standards, describe some of the strategic measures that are part of the city council's transparency programs called Leading for Results, describe sources and uses of funds, its budget highlights. So from a service standpoint, we're maintaining over about 6,500 miles of pipe, serving 203,000 water customers, 191 wastewater customers. Last year, at the end of fiscal year 14, we had treated an average of 93.2 million gallons of water a day and almost 62 million gallons of wastewater a day. And we also answered almost 419,000 customer service calls. We set goals that are in our Leading for Results program. Second qualified workforce is key for us as we attempt to replace baby boomers going through some large retirements throughout the utility. We've trained 38 employees in what we call Utilities University, a skill development program. We have 40 more employees enrolled regularly, and a total of 100 taking a few classes here and there. We've dropped our injury rate to 9.5%. That's still high. Our goal for an injury rate is 8% by 2020, and we continue to work on changes that can help make us better at working safely. Financial management goals were all met by AQUAT when it completed a cost of service study. It recommended inclining block rates, which were adopted, and of course those things led to a confirmation of your AAA credit rating from Standard & Poor's, as well as a positive outlook from Moody's on the AA rating. Other service standards include completing water line repairs in about 4 hours, getting to 70% of main breaks in 72 hours. We have a contract in place that helps us do that when we have an abundance of emergency repairs needed. And we've also increased security of our electronic data systems this year. We do meet regulations virtually 100% of the time. The water system met regulations 100% of the time. The wastewater treatment plants met regulations about 99.96% of the time, which is pretty darn fabulous. We updated our emergency response plan in fiscal year 2015. The pictures that you're seeing here are of the May 2013 tornado as it approached Draper and the debris that it left on your property in the southeast part of the city. We do deliver to customers about 2.4 billion gallons of wastewater for reuse, and on June the 1st, we'll open the third water conservation demonstration garden, this one at the Oklahoma City Zoo. AQUAT's total budget is $429,457,000. 62% of that is the capital program. You'll take an income of $228 million this year in service charges. We'll add an additional $11.4 million in other sources and cash reserves. Non-ratepayer revenue will contribute $800,000. And debt funds, that's $40 million from the State Revolving Loan Fund and $149 million in commercial paper will be used to finance the capital program. I'll describe more in a minute. The uses, again, of interest, the wastewater treatment plant operations contract is $16.3 million. Current debt service payments are $42.4 million. City operations, which I'll describe a little bit more, are $84.3 million. The AQUAT operations budget, which I'll also describe, is $19.5 million this year. Moving to AQUAT's operating budget itself, I want to hit some highlights there. It's a total of $19.5 million. It includes, for example, $3.7 million for bill print and mail and operation of our billing system, the SAP system. We will be making pavement repairs at $2.2 million, spending money for sludge removal that will be reduced in a few years when we've implemented some additional sludge treatment programs at the water treatment plants, but it's $1.5 million this year. Commercial paper costs us $650,000 a year for a letter of credit. The conservation contract with OSU that's helping us implement water conservation will be $332,000 this year. There are a host of other things like memberships and travel that make up the $3.5 million, USGS services, things like that. So I'm proposing an addition of 9.5 positions to our budget. We'll be increasing the wastewater operating reserve to 2% by adding about $96,000. We'll be adding 2 civil engineers to the engineering division as project managers for the raw water program, which kicks off this year in earnest. I'm asking for a 3-person crew to replace water meter vaults, and that is simply because our main replacement program is not finding all the meter vaults. We're building a liability with failing meter vaults accessible to folks who could step on them. In the most simple way I can explain it. In line maintenance, we're adding a fuel technician that will share with the solid waste utility that will help run our CNG facilities. And we're currently paying $18,000 a month for a contract that does that work. This is the trade-off for cost. It's an improvement. I'm asking for a night crew for water line repairs that will work from 5 in the evening until 1 in the morning. That's so we can get out into some of our commercial areas when there are fewer people present. We do also need the work. This will help reduce overall overtime for this work. And I'm adding an assistant superintendent at water quality because the span of control is so large there that we need an additional person to help us focus on the water treatment plants as we're going through large amounts of construction. We're asking for $295,000 for an additional electricity and chemical costs. That's about a 5% increase. We're asking for $30,000 to help fund by feed and fencing for goats as we move the goats to the starting point of the Hafner Canal and attempt to use them to clean up the canal of most of the weeds and small trees. Capital improvements are the very largest portion of the program, of course, and larger than we have experienced in the past. This map shows water projects that we are working on in 2015 in green, projects that are coming up in 2016 in blue. In wastewater, the darker red is what we're doing now, and most of that is plant work, as you can see, with some neighborhood replacements. In 2016, we'll be doing more pipeline work in the wastewater system, particularly building a large pipe, a 72-inch pipe that you see running south of I-40 that will help improve our capacity to carry wastewater from those subbasins. And those are kind of the last things that we need to do to met our 2008 consent order with ODEQ for sewer improvements the 2008 consent order that followed the 2007 floods and created new standards for the wastewater system. So we have 1.5 miles left to bid of the westward extension improvements that we started in 2006 that have greatly improved water delivery to the south and west part of the city. Our next move is to go north, and what you'll see in our upcoming program is main replacements, transmission mains, surge control improvements on the Atoka pipeline. We're working at Hafner on a new pump station, an expanded pump station, bringing water into the plant to make that reliable for the plant to match the plant's capacity. We're doing the same thing at the Draper plant. At both Hafner and Draper, we're working on sludge dewatering facilities that will help us again handle the sludge that's become too much to handle with evaporative lagoons as we did in the past. We'll be building a pump station at the Overholser plant that is the first piece of the transition of Overholser. It will work now, but it will also help transition us to the system connection program that will eventually take the Overholser plant offline. We'll complete the detailed engineering for the Southeast Supply Program. Wastewater is a little bit simpler. It is about 12.5% of the total capital program. Working throughout the community, we'll be making lift station upgrades. I've already mentioned the 72-inch relief line along I-35 from South Shields to Southeast 19th Street. Also working on rehabilitation in the area immediately east of the stockyards, east and south of the stockyards. Again, a relatively low-lying area. There's a lot of potential for stormwater collection. Finally, we'll be in total, capital programs $265 million, $33 million of that is wastewater. That's all funded by cash. The remainder is the water CIP. This is the largest of the anticipated capital programs over the next several years. This is the peak year that was a part of your financial plan last year. That was a pretty rapid overview. I would be happy to answer questions.
Marcia, I noticed there's a pretty significant reduction in professional services from this year to next year. What are we not needing this year that we had to utilized last year?
I believe that was the funding for a couple of special studies. It was the financial plan,
Right.
the rate study.
Okay.
And I'll get you that information. I'll get you exactly.
Tinker? The Tinker one?
Thank you. Yes,
Okay.
it was.
Okay, thank you.
Any budget that increases funding for goats can't be a bad budget.
So I don't mean to belabor the point. They've been helpful. The staff's working well. That was the important thing to me, that we'd know what we're doing. And fortunately, we have some folks who raise goats at their homes who've been happy to help. The question is, how much can they actually eat? How many goats would it take to make a material difference in a program? In the canal, it's fabulous. It's a very, very difficult place to clean. The goats have cleaned things out enough so that we can see the tripping hazards for people. So that part has worked. However, again, remarkably exciting CIP coming up this year. Mr. Samandy's ready to go.
I know there's been some conversation about changing the operational responsibility for the recreational activities at Draper. Is that a budget? Would that have a budget impact of significance that we need to talk about or allocate something?
I don't anticipate that it will have something significance that we could not handle. So by way of background, the concessionaire operation contract at Draper has expired. We've sought new proposals and really got proposals only to continue what's going on, and we're hopeful that we could do something a little better. At the staff level, we've been talking between the Utilities Department and the Parks Department about options that might exist for recreation activities they would like to see occur at Draper. It seems like a really good fit, but we have not made adequate progress yet that we can present something to you at this stage of the budget. So we are continuing to work. We will get back with you as quickly as we can about that.
Any other comments? Okay, we need a motion to approve the budget, I believe.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the budget. Any additional comments or questions? Voting, please. Budget's approved. We do not need executive session today.
Will we strike the item?
Second.
Motion to strike 5B, stricken. Item 6, items from trustees. Hearing none. Move to the general manager's report. Actually, I did have a comment from a trustee, since I'm a trustee. One of the people that's at our trust meeting almost virtually every time we have a trust meeting is having a birthday, and his birthday is so significant they changed the name of a major highway to 66 as a result of his birthday. So Charlie Swinton is now a man of significant notoriety, having a highway named after his age. It's amazing. I never heard of that before. Congratulations, Charlie. Now, the comedian is finished for a minute.
Are you ready for general manager reports? Okay. Trustees asked about water conservation impacts. So today we have Mallory Gotcher and Leo Z talking to us about what we see in the data. Mallory, take it away.
Good afternoon. This presentation is just a follow-up addressing the question that we received at the previous AQUIT meeting about the effect of water conservation programming on water consumption. And Leo's here with me today. He's going to explain more about the data. And we just have some really good news to share about how our customers are doing a great job responding to the water conservation program by working to reduce their water use year-round. In Oklahoma, we have a cyclical pattern of drought. And in the 80s and 90s, our state really enjoyed above average rainfall amounts. But in 2011, our state started experiencing drought conditions again, and that has created an appreciation and awareness of the need to conserve water. And it's resulted in the permanent water conservation and demand management measures, which we started in 2013. And to kind of support those efforts, we started the enforcement program and started issuing citations and warnings since May. And we've had about 815 citations and almost 3,000 warnings since then. Not to mention our outreach efforts to help support this program and the Squeeze Every Drop campaign. And so it's important to track water consumption and our water conservation outreach efforts to determine how behavior is changing or if it's changing at all. And so an analysis was completed that Leah is going to talk about. And for the study, we used 2 weather factors that directly affect water consumption: cooling degree days, which is typically used to track energy use changes due to weather patterns. It's just the number of degrees that a day's average temperature is above 65 degrees. Since we assume that people are using more water during hotter days, and precipitation, since we hope that people are watering less during rainy days. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Leo, and he's going to show how our residential customers have responded to our conservation program by reducing their water use.
Thank you, Mary. So to find out the answer, we started from the historical data before we have the conservation program. So the blue lines represents 4 years of data between 2009 and 2013. So they are the monthly consumption for single-family residential accounts. So we run a linear regression analysis to produce a line to approach the actual consumption, which is the red dotted line out there. And the mathematical expression of the red line is at the bottom of the slides. It says projected consumption is 5.74 plus something minus something. So it means that we find out that the base consumption for a residential account is 5.74 thousand gallons. And if we have hotter days in a month, people will use more water. And if we have rainfall in a month, people will use less water. So we have a model that we can apply to other months. And this graph shows the 2 years after the conservation program started. So we applied the rainfall and temperature data into the model, and what we get is the shaded area. The shaded area represents what the model predict would the consumption be. Okay, and so if people's behavior didn't change, all the monthly consumption will still fall into this shaded area. But as you see for the green triangles out there, that the actual consumption we recorded, mostly and consistently, they fall below the shaded area. So it is not just for winter and for other seasons as well. So we concluded that people use less water in winter, and they also use less water in other seasons. So the analysis showed that there's a shift in water usage after the water conservation program started. And that's it. Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
We're making a little progress.
Well, and we'll continue to look at the data. You know, I didn't even take a statistics course, but I love the idea that it could get a better answer if you had more data over time. So we'll continue to do that. And looking forward again, we're opening the zoos water conservation garden in a couple of weeks, and working with OSU extension program about how to market certain kinds of messages, convince people to put in rain indicators, for example, in commercial sprinkler systems, things like that. That's kind of our next steps.
Is there any reliable way to differentiate between the impact on consumption based on price versus regulation?
I think we have some technical reports that we can give you some background information acquired by other utilities about the difference that price makes. Certainly, we know that all the messages about the drought, particularly not so much in 2013 when we did have a moderately wet year, but in the lakes were full. But in the last year, messages about drought have been very consistent, and that may have had an impact as well as pricing. Finally, rates pricing, a general malaise about yard maintenance, maybe. But sarcasm aside, it has. Yeah, there are some standard things that make an impact.
Yeah, I think we'll find it's, at least from my perspective, it's got to be three-pronged. One is obviously rates, and we shouldn't encourage people to consume more than they need to. A general awareness of the drought helps when they keep seeing it on every weatherman talks about how far above and below we are. I think people respond. The other one we need to look at, and luckily the City Council gets to wrestle with this, are things like what are the standards for building codes as we go forward? How do we change, right? Do we encourage or do you require low-flow devices, whatever it might be? And then over time, you really can build some momentum because we're fortunate that we have adequate supply that gives us that horizon to do some things, and you don't have to hammer anybody with sudden shifts. And if we take these small steps, in 30 years, they'll be in a position to hopefully continue to grow as a community.
And Mallory and Brett and other administrative staff members are working on a conservation plan that follows the American Water Works Association guidelines.
Thank you. Well, the next item has to do with the water status report. And it's going to rain a little bit. I heard the thunder a while ago.
We are expecting a gracious amount of rain in Oklahoma City. I want you to know that it has been raining, like Kenton said, 0.4 of an inch of rain in the last 2 hours, and there's some inflow going into the lake. There was also heavy rain earlier, about 10 miles upstream of Kenton, that we're hopeful will finally hit the lake. A little disappointed it hasn't yet. But Lake Hefner is at 1198 plus, which means it has 1 foot to full and 2 foot to the maximum that we could put in it. Like Overholser is about 1.5 feet below maximum. Like Draper is full, is more than full. Canton remains regrettably at about 11 feet under full.
Have they just not had the rains up there that allow the flows to fill into the lake, or are we seeing a recharge?
I think we're seeing some recharge for sure between the upstream where we know we had 3 inches of rain. It's a very slough-like area coming down toward the lake. I would think that that's a recharge zone. That's not really well quantified, but the folks who live in the Canton area identify that, talk about how the lake goes up and then drops regardless of the rain level. So I believe that to be true.
So Canton's down about 11 feet right now.
Yes.
And by the end of tomorrow, if not the end of the day, all of our other lakes will be full, if not plus full.
Right.
Yeah.
And there is potential for some runoff in the Canton.
Yes, there is.
Although how much we don't know.
Exactly. The basin is quite unpredictable, but there have been very heavy rains in the Panhandle today. So all those things are leading toward more water in the North Canadian, which is a good thing. Like Overholser, pardon me, like Overholser down 1.5 feet. McGee Creek has been discharging from its flood pool. It's about 1/2 foot below its maximum flood pool at this point after discharging for over a week at 1,000 CFS. The Lake Kentucky has been overflowing for 8 days, and at one point it was overflowing at 3.5 feet above the weir, so pretty exciting.
Okay. Any other matters to be discussed?
No.
Any citizens to be heard? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.